It's the Draft Fellows coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle, Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows. And together we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure to follow our channel on YouTube, or of course you can check us out on your favorite audio podcasting platform. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It is Thanksgiving week, and we've just finished up a really fun weekend of NFL football. And then we're moving into what we know is Thanksgiving Day, of course, where we have lots of football as well. And so I'm looking forward to taking a little bit of time off from work and just enjoying time with family and soaking in all that football, which it masks so well any family tensions or political tensions. That football just makes it all better on Thanksgiving. So looking forward to that. How are you?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this was a really fun week of football, and I was just kind of reflecting, like you and I normally we release our episode later in the week. So usually we're at about halftime or early second half of the Thursday night football game. And right now we're at halftime of the Monday night football game.
Yes.
Another really good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, tons of the early window of week 12 was just unreal. Weird stuff happening left and right. It really was the witching hour. If you were watching Red Zone, just an insane ending to a bunch of different games. And we had a lot of impactful things happen. And I think teams continue to separate themselves, which makes what we're doing today, I think, a little bit easier because the draft order is really starting to shape out.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are late November. And so some people are ready, like they're already in draft mode, kind of talking about what the next class is going to look like. Some people, that's a little bit harder for them to kind of get there at this point. But the reality is some teams are starting to get eliminated from playoff contention. So some of those fan bases, you are starting to drift into this draft conversation a little bit because that's where the hope of your franchise is. And so we are going to continue that conversation today with Andrew's third mock draft of 2025. The cycle, of course, we're still 2024. But this is a fun one. This is all 32 picks, some surprises, and I think just some intrigue around the landscape of this class in general. So why don't you jump in here at the top and let's get into this mock.
Yeah, so we're not going to cover every single pick. We will go through as many of them as we can in the time that we have. And this is the draft order as of Monday. So we are not factoring in the result of the Ravens-Chargers game, as I just alluded to, is not over yet. But they were picking back-to-back at 24 and 25 anyway. So you're not going to see a bunch of jumbled results as far as that goes. So let's take a look at the top 10 first. And I actually have a trade. I don't normally do trades in the situation, but I wanted to spice it up a little bit because I've been going with the same player to the Jaguars at number one over and over, and I just don't think that's the reality of the situation. So the Raiders are going to leapfrog the Giants and go from number 3 to number 1, and they are going to draft Miami quarterback Cam Ward first overall. And then the Giants are going to come back at 2 and take their quarterback of the future, Shedeur Sanders, out of Colorado. Any thoughts on those two?
So this is going to be fascinating because I have just begun. It's early in the process. I've just begun kind of digging into quarterbacks a little bit. And Shedeur is a player that I haven't loved a ton early. He's grown on me a little bit. It's kind of one of those acquired taste things where you're like, okay, put him in the right bucket and you can see why people like him. I just got into Cam Ward a little bit earlier this week, and I really liked a lot about Cam Ward. And his path is a little bit different than a lot of quarterbacks. He's bounced around a little bit, but there's a lot to like with Cam Ward. I don't know, the Raiders obviously need that guy, right? So them getting to 1. And I do believe, if I had to guess today, I think Cam Ward will probably be my top quarterback in this class. So I like that they got up. They got the one that they like at the top. And then, Shedeur isn't a bad consolation prize there at 2 for the Giants.
Yeah, what I really liked about the fit for these two, one with Cam Ward, and we'll be careful about how many comparisons we're making, but I really like the Jordan Love comparison. I think Ward, he does like to put the ball in danger. So there's a lot
Mhm.
of like A+ throws, and then there's
Yeah,
some D- throws.
yeah,
And I think with some time to develop, you can work a little bit out of that. He's never going to be completely risk averse, but I do think that he can be a gunslinger. I think, both the Raiders' history and then also a little bit of the new ownership. I mean, I think Tom Brady could see some things he likes there with the guy
sure.
with all of the tools in the world, huge arm. I think for Las Vegas, is going to play really well. And they're a team that's probably not ready to compete from day one anyways, so they can bring him along a little bit more slowly, maybe have
Yeah,
a veteran presence, let him sit most of his rookie year. And then with Shedeur Sanders, I think the New York market makes a ton of sense for what his team is going to want him to go to in the NFL. And I think that kind of timing and rhythm passer is going to work really well with Malik Neighbors. So I
yeah,
like the fit on both of those.
yeah.
So
I think
it'll be
so.
interesting. It'll be interesting. There
Yeah.
is one other quarterback later in the mock draft.
I did see that. So that was I found that very interesting. Here in the top 10 though, just a couple other like quick highlights. Obviously, you've got the two wide receivers going high. And in a class where like I think we think the 2024 class will be better than the 2025 class at wideout, but these guys are incredibly talented too. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they can go as early as this in the draft and as we get a little bit further into this. And then a lot of Michigan talent here in the top 10 as well. Interesting. I have heard that there are people who actually like Kenneth Grant more than Mason Graham. And I don't know
That's
that that's
interesting.
consensus, but like going this close together, 7 and 10, like that shouldn't be, crazy to say, but that will be an interesting pair from the same school to watch throughout the process just to see which of those defensive linemen goes higher.
Yeah, and so just to clear things up for the audio listeners, Kyle is alluding to the Jaguars at 3 taking Travis Hunter, who I really think is probably more of a corner in my mind, but definitely the Jags could use some help in a lot of different areas, so corner and wide receiver, and then Tetairoa McMillan to the Patriots at 4. The Michigan players he's alluding to, the Titans at 6 grab cornerback Will Johnson. And that's not a need. Like that one was tough for me because I was like, the things the Titans really need, not necessarily available there. But let's just go get a great corner and
Right.
and add another elite piece to this defense, which has been so good so far.
Mhm.
The Jets at 7 taking Mason Graham, the first alluded to defensive lineman,
Yes.
and for the Jets to pair Graham right next to Quinn Williams, that's a potential scary duo going forward. And then at 10, I had the Bengals taking Kenneth Grant, the other defensive lineman for Michigan. But like saying other is a little bit too disrespectful. he's
Yeah.
he's fantastic in his own right. And for the Bengals, they need some help in that interior defensive line to really shore things up on that defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, we do have a running back going in the top 10 here, and it's always exciting when you have a player that's worth that selection, right? At the running back position, because the NFL's kind of gone away from taking running backs maybe this high. But Ashton Gentry is a player that I've watched a good bit of just because he's always on Sports Center and you can't miss the highlights, right? But I think the Browns getting a player of this caliber to plug in probably towards the end of Chubb's career and maybe be the centerpiece of an offense as they kind of try to get a new identity there is definitely an interesting fit.
Yeah, the Browns kind of, with the win on Thursday night, they sort of play themselves out of that quarterback range. And then in addition, the Cowboys win, and then they're the team that always gets mocked, Ashton Jeanty,
Yeah.
and they're sliding out of the top 10. And so I just thought this was a really interesting perspective. If the Browns can't get their quarterback, how do they sort of reinvest in the offense? Maybe they bring back Jameis Winston for next year.
Yeah.
Maybe they really like what they have in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I'm not sure about the future of the quarterback position there. But yeah, I mean, Nick Chubb looked great on Thursday, but he is a aging running back, which is already a problem coming off of his second I don't know how this guy keeps coming back from these injuries, because they're usually career enders for running backs, but he is a freak of nature. And yes, I think he could be really good, but the Browns in the past also had Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And I think Ginty can be sort of that 1B for now, and then slowly transition into that and give yourself a great run game to go with a defense that you're hoping has a big bounce back next season.
Yeah, absolutely. So good for Nick Chubb. The durability is incredible, and just the career he has had has been phenomenal. So good on him for powering through those injuries. But how about we turn the page to this next set here? For
Yeah.
the audio listeners, let's give them the rundown with what we've got going here.
Yeah, so some interesting picks here. At 11, the Dallas Cowboys take Abdul Carter, the edge out of Penn State. The Bears taking tackle Kelvin Banks from Texas, the offensive tackle. Colts grabbing Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. And, I don't need to read the entire list, but I think there's some interesting ones on here that we can highlight as we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
So what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say any of these that stick out to you, but I want to point out one thing. The Cowboys taking Abdul Carter. Have they ever had any success with a Penn State edge rusher?
You think they might go back to the well here a little bit?
Man, I don't know. The Cowboys need a lot of help. That is very clear. I think, you start to take a look at, DeMarcus Lawrence, and he's aging. I do think the Cowboys have some fun edge pieces, but
Yeah.
Carter's somebody that can kind of play all over, and I think that versatility would really, really help out this defense. I think 13's a fun pick. Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, one of the better players in this draft. It's just like, how high do you want to take a safety? And for the Colts, they have a huge need there, so I think that was a fun fit for them as well.
Yeah, my producer was quickly pulling up because I was thinking Micah Parsons got picked at 11, but it was 12. So obviously we have a long way. So the Cowboys can fall a slot, and then it can work out. They can take both Penn State guys there. But I think the tackles are really fascinating. Like, you have Will Campbell going 9, and then Kelvin Banks, and I think those guys are going to go back and forth like throughout this whole process. I think those guys will be in competition for OT1. And then I know we get into this next run at the end of this. I don't know. We haven't mentioned these names yet, but on the opposite side here, you've got Josh Simmons going 18. You've got, is it Ears? How do you say the Minnesota guy?
I believe it is Arante Irsay.
Arante Ursary. Anyway, we apologize. Good player. Can't say his name. Minnesota, the tackle there, and then Cameron Williams at Texas. There's kind of a run here. Like last year, again, we had a great class of offensive tackles coming in. The NFL is really hungry for these guys to come in and be the bookends. I think we know Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell will be the top, but then there's going to be a bunch of guys in the late teens, early 20s potentially to sort out as well, because there's other tackle talent to be had in this draft as well. So fun to see those names all creeping into this first round.
Yeah, if you go down the list of team needs across the NFL, tackle shows up a lot. And there just aren't that many tackles in this class. So some of these players are going to get pushed up probably higher than they should. You mentioned at 9, that was on the previous slide, but Will Campbell going to the Saints. And the one big question about Will Campbell is, like, is he a tackle or is he kicking to the interior? And the reason why I took him for the Saints is because I don't think it really matters for them. They just need good offensive linemen. So if he fails that tackle, you can slide him inside and you're going to have a really, really strong guard for a long time. For the Bears, I think tackle is a huge need. I think Banks is a developmental guy, but they can probably afford to watch him come along. And then, Josh Simmons is a guy who might have been at the top of this tackle class, but has an unfortunate injury at Ohio State. I think for the Cardinals, that's a great place to go. They can continue to invest in the offensive line. Ursary is probably a little bit more of a developmental prospect, but for the Seahawks, I think, they have two starters that at tackle that they can probably afford to go with for a little while he develops. And Cameron Williams for Washington, maybe a little bit more of a right tackle, but I think that's a strong fit for Washington and making sure that you're protecting your biggest asset at quarterback.
Yeah. So you got a couple tight ends here, and I find some of the landing spots a little bit interesting. Obviously, Colston Loveland is a player that I've watched a good bit of. and you have him going 16 to the LA Rams. You've got Tyler Warren also being a first round tight end, which is a big deal, right? When the tight ends get into the first round mix, a lot of talent there, right? Tyler Warren of Penn State to the Texans. So I love the Colston Loveland fit in LA with Matthew Stafford, assuming that he continues there for another year. Just the combination there of Puka Nacua, potentially Cooper Kupp, and then adding in a Colston Loveland kind of threat, I feel like is pretty dynamic for that offense. And then I think it's been pretty obvious this year that Stroud is a really good quarterback in Houston, but when he hasn't had all of his weapons available, it's kind of been a struggle. So adding somebody else in who can be that talented player in the middle of the field and give him some outlets and places to check the ball down to as well, I think could be really valuable.
Yeah, I really like, I mean, if you believe the rumors, the Rams were like really in love with Brock Bowers and just proving themselves right over and over.
Yes.
Brock
Oh, that
Bowers,
hurts. Yeah.
Jared Verse turned out pretty good for them. So I think, that interest in an athletic move tight end, I think Loveland probably is this year's version of that. He's not, I don't think anybody's as good as Bowers, but like he can be that version for them. And as they're looking to, the long-term replacement for Cooper Kupp, adding additional weapons to that offense sort of takes them to the next level. Defenses can't focus in on their two wide receivers quite as much. And then, of course, as you mentioned, a lot of guys missing time. So having another weapon is a big deal for them. And then Tyler Warren, I think in a really strong first round, maybe Tyler Warren doesn't push up into the first, or especially not like 22nd overall. But I think for the Texans, this year's draft class is going to be down a little bit, but they're looking for weapons. Dalton Schultz looks like he's running in quicksand on every play. And I think juicing that position up a little bit will help with taking a little bit of pressure off of Nico Collins, helping to open up the rest of the middle of the field for Tank Dell. I think this helps your offense in a lot of ways. And for CJ Stroud continuing to add weapons around him while that defense looks really, really strong, I think is going to be important to continue the development and helping this team get to the next level.
Yeah, totally agree. How about we flip over to the end of this draft? We've got picks 23 through 32 here. Some more interesting players that have been higher in some other mocks. And maybe they do end up going a little bit higher, but here I've slipped down into maybe like serious value for what are already going to be playoff teams. So this is fun.
Yeah, I really, there's a few in here that I liked as I saw the board unfold, because it was less about need and more about like, how does this fit in with the team? What do they normally draft? Like, what kind of players are they typically looking for? For the Ravens, get an Alabama edge, because, the Ravens love Alabama players. LT Overton, who is a really heavy edge. I think he's somebody the Ravens would love to play around with a little bit. Maybe he can play edge on rundowns and then kick inside for pass downs. I think he's the kind of edge they look to develop long-term and have had tons and tons of success with. At 25, I had the Chargers taking running back Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. And J.K. Dobbins has been an amazing story, but like, how long can that hold out? We don't know. And I don't know if Gus Edwards is a long-term replacement, but they don't have a lot in the running back room past this year under contract. So maybe they bring one or two of those guys back, but having a real difference maker in Judkins would be helpful. And then at 26, Pittsburgh Steelers going with quarterback Jalen Milroe out of Alabama.
Man.
To me, this harkens back to the Ravens taking Lamar Jackson. And people were like, wow, well, he's really athletic. He has a really strong arm. But like, can this guy play quarterback? And I feel like some of those same questions are being raised about Milroe. And I think in this Pittsburgh offense, he could be like special. Like maybe a nice combination of what they're looking at right now. Justin Fields looked good in this offense, but didn't quite have the arm to keep things going. And Russell Wilson has looked really good so far, but I don't know how long that is. And I think maybe you get Milroe, you bring Russ back for another year, you let him learn for a year, and then you throw him in the mix in 2026.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Obviously, that's only to pick 26, but we got to stop there for just a second because Milrow is a big deal. It's interesting because we've got the top two guys. You've got Cam Ward at 1, Shador at 2. Obviously, those teams gobbling up the quarterbacks at the top. It'll be interesting. Do we get that big of a break? Because it happens in the NFL, right? Like,
Yeah.
teams take the guys that they feel like are, you can't say locks, but they have the best chance of hitting early. And then there's kind of this, like, I don't know, do they slip into the back, just like Lamar did, you know? And it'll be interesting to see where is the value for Jalen Milrow. Like, obviously the talent is there, super athletic. He's the guy. I was looking at some stuff today. I think he's the youngest quarterback that's eligible to come out in this class. So it's not only the athleticism, it's that there's a little bit of untapped potential here too, that you got to take that swing. And do they take it early? Does he go in the top 10 because of that? Or is it kind of this later conversation where he falls to a team like the Steelers, who have the infrastructure, and in a couple of years you're looking back and you're like, how did we let a player with that much talent go to an organization like the Pittsburgh Steelers? So that would be a ton of fun. I love the Judkins fit there. It feels like the Chargers have things rolling, and just adding in a player like that's going to be super helpful for them. But next up here, the Green Bay Packers, you've got taking a defensive lineman. Obviously, they could use some talent there just to reinforce that defense with new defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley there. Would love to add a little bit more talent. Tyler Booker goes 28 to the Minnesota Vikings. Tennessee Volunteer, James Pierce Jr., the edge player, goes to the Eagles. And then we've got a few other players to round out this first round with Tyleik Williams, the defensive lineman from Ohio State, going to the Buffalo Bills. West Virginia, Wyatt Millam. That's a player I have not watched yet. Is that how you say that, Millam?
Yes, I believe so.
And he goes to the Chiefs. And then Kevin Winston Jr., the safety from Penn State, cracks the first round, going to the Detroit Lions. Any of these that you really liked?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think Walter Nolan, the defensive lineman out of Ole Miss, I think that's a name to watch as a potential riser. I think, there's some really intriguing physical tools there. A huge guy, long arms. I think he could potentially see his draft stock go up pretty significantly. For the Vikings to take Tyler Booker, I think he's the best pure interior offensive lineman. We kind of talked about, like, there's some tackles that are tweeners and we're not sure where they're going to play. But if like, I need a guard, and the Vikings certainly do.
Yeah.
Tyler Booker is a really good fit there. I don't know what happened, how James Pierce Jr. fell as far as he did. He shouldn't have. But for the Eagles, they just seem to always be sitting there waiting for the next Brandon Graham to fall in their laps. Brandon Graham, another kind of like 20s-ish edge rusher that shouldn't have fallen as far as he did. And for Pierce, just really, really, really intriguing athletic tools. I think he could be a major disruptor in Philadelphia. Yeah, and then I wrapped things up with Kevin Winston Jr., the safety from Penn State to the Lions. Do the Lions need a safety? No, they do not. They have a great safety room. But for them, they just seem to like want to take the best player available. And for me, like, Winston belonged in the first round. I didn't find a spot for him, but the Lions just take whatever player is the best on paper, and then they figure out how to use them, and they'll get really creative, right? Like, Brian Branch can drop down in the slot full time, and they can play two high safeties. But yeah, I think he's a really good player, and for the Lions, they don't have a lot of needs.
Yeah, I like that we dropped in a couple of offensive tackles and offensive linemen here at the end. The Vikings going ahead, they add Tyler Booker in a year where they're probably getting JJ McCarthy back. And so just doing their best to make sure that that young player has the best start to his career as he can, with a little bit of extra protection. And then the Chiefs, they just are giving up on wide receivers. They acquire them in trades and figure out what they need to, but they're like, we got to keep our, franchise quarterback upright. And so they add another tackle here as well. So an interesting first round across the board. We've got the 3 quarterbacks. It'll be interesting if we get more than that. Do we get less than that? Is it just the 2? And then again, a lot of people talked about this being a really light offensive tackle class a few months ago relative to last year. And I think I counted 6 in this mocks. And so a lot of things still to unfold in the weeks ahead, but it looks like it always happens this year where people say like it's going to be a little bit of an underwhelming class, and then as you build into it, strengths of last year aren't the strengths of this year, but this is turning out to be a class that has a lot of talent as well. So stay tuned. We're going to keep talking through this, and we are just around the corner from really getting into peak draft season. So thanks for joining us on the show today. If you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to the show. If you couldn't tell, we were working through a list on YouTube. So if you're on the audio version, go check out the YouTube version so you can see the graphics there. That'll help you as you work through the mock as well. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw. We talking pro ball, yeah, you know.